Morning guys. Last week's video about the 10-2 challenge really got me thinking, and somebody actually responded on that video with a question, one of my friends, and he said, Emile, this is really great to kind of see a different perspective and try to look at the possibility, but there's kind of a next step to that, right? We have to engage, we have to do something, we have to go over into activity. And I told him I'd need some time to just process through that, because it's true, right? And with most things, that would be the expectation. The challenge is with something like this, when we start talking about systemic change, like big wheels that require much more than my own effort, the dynamics almost start to shift a little bit, right? And it's almost like we have these two poles on a spectrum that we tend to resort to when we're confronted with this type of reality. And I think we see that play out in the story of the 12 spies. On the one hand, you have this passivity, which is just kind of a nice way of saying hopelessness, right? There's no way we can do this. Like, our effort is a drop in the bucket. It can't really make a difference. And that resorts us to this kind of place of hopeless, surrender. We just give up, we become passive, we actually begin to criticize the process because we're so frustrated that we can't do anything about it, and we're now just victims of the process that we resort to criticism. And I think on the other side of this spectrum, we have hyperactivity. We're like, yes, we're going to try to do everything that we possibly can do. And there's a big danger in that, to go outside of our realm of authority, outside of our realm of influence, because we're trying to take responsibility for things that really we can't take responsibility for. And it's about how we navigate this tension when we're talking about really big challenges like conquering the promised land, which in our context just means really the big challenges that our society faces. How do we think about them? How do we engage them in a healthy way? And I've really been encouraged by the story we see in Jesus' feeding of the 5,000, because I think it just gives us such great handles. If we want to understand how to posture ourselves in the midst of the spectrum between passivity and hyperactivity, then we should look to Jesus, right? What is the example that he sets? What is the teaching that he gives in the space? And the first thing that I want to say is Jesus' framework brings everything into relationship. And I think that's the challenge we have with hyperactivity. Hyperactivity is activity focused, it's outcomes focused, its starting point is almost frustration or fear or anger or irritation. And although that is a good catalyst, the starting point really should be relationship, right? Should be love. Otherwise, without love, all the activity just becomes noise. It becomes the clanging cymbals because we have not love. And so Jesus' framework automatically is a framework of relationship. He brings it into the space of people journeying together. And so back to the story of the 5,000, the disciples face a crisis. It's a massive crisis. It's something far bigger than they can conquer by themselves, right? They have these 5,000 people. It's getting late in the day. They've been listening to the teaching of Christ for the whole day, and they're getting a little bit like hangry, actually, most likely, right? And so the disciples, having seen this issue, come to Jesus, relational, and they're like, Jesus, I think, here's the problem. Here's our solution. Our solution is send them home, like ASAP. Get these people out of our space. And Jesus reframes the entire context. He says, what do you have? Not how big is the problem, not what can you do, but what do you have? And so the disciples go, and I think there's an incredible lesson in this to say, well, they're now going into the audience that they have, and they're asking who has food. Like, we know the solution. The solution is a lot of food. We don't have any of that, but we will make the need known because we're in a position to see the need. None of the 5,000 understand the dynamics in the leadership in this context, right? So they don't know what's happening, how people are solving the problem. The disciples know that, but they make that known to the party and the people who are participating in this miracle. And they say, guys, who has food? One kid whose mom probably packed his lunchbox is like, hey, I've got 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, right? And he's willing to surrender that. He's willing to say, hey, I understand the challenge and the need. I'm willing to give the little bit that I have and make that available to everybody. So the one kid says, here's what I have, I will make it available. The disciples take this back to Jesus. They're like, Jesus, here's what we have, the little bit that we have. And he says, okay, now break these people into groups of 50s and 100s and sit them down and start giving them these pieces of food, right? Now, can you imagine? The first disciple, I'm assuming they each get their own little group. They probably go to the small group, like the 51 or the one that has 49 or 48, just because that's how the numbers work out, and they start there. And they're like, okay, I'm going to now take a really small piece and give that to every single person, because I need to make this portion of bread that I have, which is not even a whole bread, and I need to make it last for these 48 people. That's the size of my faith. And they start dishing it out. And as they dish it out, they're like, but I got much more left than I thought. And then they start almost becoming more generous and more generous and more generous. And I feel like the incredible blessing and lesson in this is to say, when we are confronted with challenges that for us actually move us to a place of passivity and hopelessness, Jesus brings that into relationship, and he says, come talk to me. Martha, Martha, you are troubled by many things. You go into hyperactivity and you try to do all of the stuff. But Mary has chosen the good portion. She sits at the feet of Jesus. Come to my feet. Hear what I have to say. And I send you and I say, look at what you have in your hand. Make the need known and harness that which is already available in the environment. And then bring that to me. But let's have a plan. Let's start with small portions of people. And take whatever faith that you have and take that to that grouping of people and solve for that. And once you've solved for that, go on to the next one. And so I want to encourage you practically, no matter how big the challenge is that you're currently facing, all you really need to do is go sit at the feet of Jesus. Start from a place of relationship. What is he telling you today? And begin with that, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant it is. We tend to think about this, I think, sometimes like Elijah did when he was defeated and he was running away for his life. And he said, I cannot do this anymore. He almost falls into a very deep depression, and God says, but you think you're the only one. There are 4,000 other servants of God in this kingdom, and they're doing the same stuff that I'm asking you to do. And it's because we try to solve the whole problem by ourselves that we kind of miss the point. But Jesus is saying it's not just you. There are many like you. And if each of you just help the 50 or the 48 or 47, if you play the arbitrage, then all of a sudden we see cities change and we see countries change. So what is God asking you today? Bless you with that.